Thank you for staying with us on the program. In this second segment, we turn our attention to political matters in Africa. The former president of Malawi, Peter Mutharika, has been re-elected, winning 56.8% of the vote in last week's polls. The Election Commission confirmed the result on Wednesday, with the incumbent, Lazarus Chakwera, trailing after him with 33% of the votes cast. President Chakwera, who came into power in 2020, considered defeat, saying it is only right to respect the will of the people. He also pledged a peaceful transfer of power in the region. The vote was one of Malawi's most closely watched in years. It was held against the backdrop of severe economic hardship. The World Bank estimates that almost 3/4 of Malawians live on less than $3 a day, and inflation has soared to 33%, with cost of food and fuel on the high side. Joining us for this latest development in Malawi, I'm joined by African Affairs analyst Amuda Moshibodi. Good to have you join us on the news at this time. At 85 years, Mutharika has been re-elected with 56.8% of the vote. Given his age and power record, what kind of leadership change, if any, can Malawians realistically expect in this new term?
I think we should first start with the notion that age has nothing to do with political performance in governance. Age has nothing to do. And we can cite a lot of examples, because we've seen young persons get elected into government and they do next to nothing. You know, they just ride on the wave of populism. So it matters less whether you are 85, you are 90. What matters is what are the things you're bringing on board. And unfortunately, in this instance, we can hardly pick one, or we can hardly point to one strategic thing. Aside the old sloganeering that we saw during the old election period between Chakwera and Mutharika and even Joyce Banda, there is nothing. So I'm not enthusiastic about the emergence of Muthsrika, because there was a reason he was voted out of power in 2020. And 5 years down the line, Malawians believe that he is the best thing again to be voted for. It raises one fundamental issue, which is the quality of informed electorate. And I have always said this, that an uninformed electorate is as dangerous to a democracy as an autocracy. In fact, it is a similitude. It shares a similitude to autocracy, because when you are a member, when you are part of the electorate and you're not informed, you can be sure that the wrong decisions you take would always impact on the general populace. And that's what we are seeing in Malawi. We are seeing a situation where a Chakwera, who came with his own populism, won the election, and now is also voted out by the same, weapon, which is the weapon of populism. So there is nothing much to actually expect, from Muthsrika, because if he could not do all of this, yes, he had some perks of development while he was president, dropped inflation, some, infrastructure here and there. But then, what exactly is he going to bring on board? That's the big question and the big elephant in the room.
And it may have seemed as though, Malawans didn't really have enough options to pick from. Critics have accused Mutharika of, mismanagement, indecisiveness during his own previous term. What do you think this recent return really signals about power play in Malawi, the state of democracy, and also voter sentiment? They're talking about the fact that they said this election was one of the closely watched.
Well, it speaks to one thing. One, we can point to the fact that there is a civic populace in Malawi that is alert. And you see how they've had elections, these elections are cancelled, and you have another election. So this election has been very closely monitored. And none of the parties have been able to come out to say, oh, there were irregularities, even though they were, but then they've been quite marginal. That speaks a lot about improvement from what we saw in 2020 that led to that election being nullified and a fresh election conducted, and what we saw now. That is on one side. But then on the quality of those who voted. Now, we also saw about 70% of registered voters turned out to vote. That's a huge a huge level of voter turnout, and that's one of the biggest we've had in Africa. So that is also a plus. However, this turnout has only, has not really translated in quality information or quality decisions by the people. These people have voted based on emotions that, oh, a Chakwera came on board, they expected so much, but then did not deliver much. Now, Muthsrika, oh, he's a better one. And you can be sure that the current spouse is always better than, the former spouse is always better than the current one. Because you will see some things in this one when things are going south that you think you have not seen in the other, or you did not see in the other. And then the other becomes the standard. And that's why we are seeing this movement to Muthsrika. In the real sense of it, Malawians cannot really say that Muthsrika is coming with one cogent thing. There are issues in agriculture. A country with over 85% of its population not having access to electricity, that's a big problem. A country with over 70% living below poverty line, that's a big problem. A country with a huge unemployment rate, that's a big problem. A country with a drop in the level of agriculture and of course its dangerous mono-economic system, that's a big problem. And we do not see a template that Muthsrika is coming in with to fix this problem. So it raises a concern for me.
Yes. Go ahead.
So it raises a concern for me as regards why and how, or what are the what are the motives behind waiting him, and that brings us to the issue of what we call, I think it was Jason Brennan in his book in 2016 titled Against Democracy, that he talks about the need for epistocracy, which is a government where, in the kind of democracy where only informed electorates are allowed to vote, because you have privileged competence. Now, when you have privileged competence, it means that your actions will redound on the image of others. Now, you are talking about Malawi where the median age is around 20. It means that there's a young population swayed by emotions and, of course, youthful exuberance. But then, all they needed is just a tip or a swing of emotions to tilt towards a candidate of their choice. And we have seen that play out. You will not be surprised that in the next 5 years, if Chakwera again contests against Muthsrika, we're going to see the repeat of this same result.
Aside the economic situation that we see in Malawi at this time, let's talk about if there is really any cause for concern. Reading President Chakwera's concession speech, he acknowledged some of the irregularities in this electoral process, which he also cited. But he said the sides, for the sake of peace, interest of national unity, to accept the result. This is not something we really see in Africa. How significant would you say this is in the context of transitions that we've seen in Southern Africa?
You see, like I mentioned earlier, Malawi is one country in Africa that you have to understand, the semi-competence of different government institutions. You recall how, even the army refused to obey the orders of Chakwera to clamp down on protesters in 2020. So Chakwera knows, that if he refuses to accept the result, okay, as much as there are irregularities here and there, refusing to accept the result would also mean that he's eating his own vomit. You remember what happened in 2020, and now Muthsrika also has to concede. So he would be left with no choice. Is it commendable? Yes, let's commend our little strike, our little strikes, no doubt. But then it does not mean that all is well with the Malawian democracy.
Very quickly, before we wrap up this conversation, Muthsrika inherits an economy which is in deep crisis at the moment. They have a high inflation, a severe shortage of fuel, as with other countries across Africa. What would you say the most urgent steps that his government should take in order to stabilize the situation? And do you think there is a risk of social unrest following this election result?
Definitely. No, I think one major thing they have to do that Muthsrika would have to do is to look at how to deal with the whole mono economy of the country. Don't forget, Malawi is landlocked. So, and this is a country with a high import rate, with very devalued currency. So, there is a need to fix the currency problem, and of course, promote more exports. Now, there is also a need to fix, the mono economy, because at the moment we have more Malawians going into subsistence farming than commercial farming, and that's not good for the economy. That is also why we have, the huge hunger strike and the huge food crisis that the country is facing, with over 40% of its citizens relying on food aid. That tells you, the enormous, that's another Venezuela on our end here in Africa. So I think the urgent thing that he needs to do is constitute an economic team that will look into how to fix this problem. Now, these problems, there is no one, it's not like there is a one band measure to fixing it. So he has to look within on how to fix it. But then these problems are already identified. The problem of mono economy, the problem of poor export ratio, and of course the issue of unemployment and food crisis within the country.
Well, Malawins have made their choice, and the President Chakwera has another term to prove himself, perhaps better than what he did the last time. Thank you for talking to us at this time, African Affairs Analyst Amuda Mushibodi. Thank you for joining us.
You're most welcome.
Right.